Informal reading inventories. Kelly Healy.
Keisha Matthews.
And Tori Sarantakis.
IRI.
The theoretical framework for IRIs. Informal reading inventories are individually administered surveys designed to help you determine a student's reading instructional needs. It was developed in 1946 by Emmett Betts and is most commonly used assessment in elementary schools.
And one of the reasons why it's so commonly used is because it's so easily used. It's an informal assessment, and one of the reasons why it's informal is because ease of use.
Students read a passage and they answer the comprehension question asked by the teacher. Teachers use outside information such as prior knowledge, emotional status, fluency, etc. to help determine a student's reading level.
We think that this is what makes these assessments so authentic.
I'm a professor at Baked Potato University and IRIs are great!
This is an example of an IRI. You can see at the top of the page a passage that the student would read. To the left is where you would record the miscues, and to the right is where you would see the comprehension questions that you would ask your student, and you could make notes in boxes explaining, the level of comprehension that the student had, or if they had missed any particular words or gotten them right. And this is an example of just one IRI. There's many out there. The significance of the IRI is that it is an individual assessment. It's something that the teacher can do with a student one-on-one. It does not have to be something that the teacher does with the entire class. The assessment is informal, so it can be done at any time by the instructor. You can pull kids out anytime during the classroom day. You can also find information on how to create your own on the web.
We also like this assessment because it's one that it's not just like a district-wide test. It's something that the teacher can administer how frequently she wants or when she wants, or he. And it's easily trackable, and the teacher can see exactly what's going on, see if there's any progress being made, and just keep track of the student in general.
Here's an example of something that I found. It's just talking about creating your own informal reading inventory. It can be something that you do in any different content level class. It doesn't have to be strictly for elementary, and it doesn't have to be strictly for reading either.
Authenticity. IRIs are authentic because they can be used daily and provide a more realistic view of the student's current reading level. Authenticity is increased as it allows for outside factors to influence outcome. Few of those factors include teacher discretion and kid watching.
All right, now we have a discussion question for you guys. So if teachers can take into account outside factors to influence the outcome of an IRI, how would kid watching come into play? Kelly, make sure you pause the video at this point.
One of the things to consider about the reliability of the IRI is what is reliability. If the teacher feels like the test is reliable because she's confident in her ability to assess her student, does that make it reliable? Or is it only reliable if it's measurable by a standardized test?
I can't believe I take an eye test and I had the worst morning. My dog died today.
Another factor that makes IRI one that is not always desirable is that it is not necessarily considered reliable. According to Janet Spector from the University of Maine, she investigated 9 recently revised IRIs, and she determined that less than half of the assessments were considered reliable.
This does not negate the value of the IRI. It should be used as a progress monitor, not a formative assessment. You can also use it for low-stakes decisions, according to Spector. She states, several appear to have sufficient reliability for lower stakes decisions, such as selection of classroom reading materials. It should also be used to guide instruction.
There's been a lot of debate about the reliability of IRIs because in general it's based off of teachers' opinions. They even took note on how 2 teachers could have the same IRI, but they would come up with different results. So now we want to know, do you think that this assessment is reliable enough that you would use it in your classroom? We love IRIs.
This is gonna be so awkward.
Don't you? Come
There's
on.
something in here?
Don't go. It's showing.
What? Oh,
We love them.
we love IRIs.
Yeah, IRIs, man.
So much.
Okay, so another discussion question. How would you use the results of an IRI to guide your instruction?
Informal reading inventories are suitable for progress monitoring, a quick snapshot, and to frame instruction. They are not suitable as a formative assessment, as a summative assessment, or to be used alone.
Some other information that we thought was important is that teachers can use IRIs to match students with appropriate books for their reading level. Teachers can also use this information to group students appropriately. And finally, IRI gives teachers information on struggling students and points out gaps or places where improvements need to be made. Okay, so now we're just going to talk a little bit about how we feel about IRIs and whether or not we would use them in our classroom. And I think that I would use it in my classroom because I just think it's an easy way to assess, and at least if I'm consistent with my students, then that way I would feel that my test would be reliable.
I completely agree. I think that as long as you understand your students and you're using it on a regular basis and you're grading it the same way every time, then it becomes more reliable.
I agree as well. I also think that something that's a common topic, I guess, discussed about standardized assessments is that they're missing that personal touch from to talk about like the students and how they're feeling that day. If their dog died the morning that they're taking that assessment, it's going to affect their test-taking skills. So I think that's something that's important that is thought about in these kinds of assessments that aren't thought about in other assessments.
And just in general, like, kids can have, obviously they can have a bad day, but standardized tests don't always, show the kids' full potential. Like, I know that I have never been really good at taking, standardized tests or, the MAPs, ISATs, any of those testings. So, IRIs do give you that personal level that she talked about, and in a way, it may not even be seen as an assessment to the students, so it won't freak them out. Sometimes, ISATs and, any of those, big tests do freak kids out sometimes.
And I also like how you can make your own. So this isn't something that you have to order online and everybody's doing the same thing. You can actually create it to work for your classroom, work for your subject. You don't have to even do it for reading in elementary school. You can use it for anything.
Overall, I think this is something that we all agree is important and maybe even necessary to use in your classroom because it does have that personal aspect. But at the same time, that's also a reason why people don't like IRIs is because they do have that aspect that's not straight data. So.
Yeah, and it does, in a sense, it does bother me that every teacher's IRIs could be different, and year to year, if IRIs are used on the same student, their data and their everything could be different just because they have different teachers each year. But in general, I don't think that's a huge problem. I think it's better just to do IRIs and get the information from them.
Well, I think, like you said, it should be used by year, by teacher, and your information, what you think about the student based on your IRIs that you're given shouldn't be put in their file that you're giving to their next teacher. That should be something that is just for you in that time period.
And I think that's how most tests in school should be. It should be based on your class that you have in that class at that time because every student is different, and that's something that we've discussed a lot about, including differentiated instruction, and this is part of that goes into it.
So now we want to know what you guys think. Would you guys use IRIs in your classroom? Do you like them? Just kind of give us a little feedback, or at least give Kelly a little feedback on what you think.
We love IRIs!
From the students themselves. Alright, well, we hope you liked our presentation, and sorry that we couldn't be there. And sorry, Kelly, because you have to watch this right now.
Yeah. I should be the only one here. There.
But I hope you learned a lot about IRIs, and hopefully you'll use them in the future.
Thanks.
See you later!